stay put. Help is on the way.
No, I don't want to die in here.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of SWAT Team Season 6 Episode 18 Recap and Review. Warning, spoilers, go ahead and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos. In the SWAT episode airing tonight, Hondo and Nichelle had just become parents. Hondo didn't get to take paternity leave, but they were granted a day to enjoy as a family. He had to get back to work far sooner than he had anticipated, so he quickly rejoined SWAT. When the team was called in after a bunch of men robbed an armored truck, he was in charge of it. Jewelry was being delivered by the truck. Unfortunately, one of the guards who was driving the truck deviated from the procedures that were meant to be followed in the event of an accident or attempted heist, and several people died as a result of it. To convince the truck to halt, the shooters first faked an accident in the street. So that no one would witness them placing an explosive under the vehicle to disable the engine, they created this distraction. That's where things deviated from the rules. Only one of the security guards on duty was a veteran, and the explosion forced the truck to remain still. She was aware that they were safer inside the truck than on the road. She wanted to wait for the gunman to leave, but the younger security guard ignored her since he was having a panic attack. The person unlocked the door. Although he felt safer inside the truck, he nonetheless left the door open out of concern that they would catch fire. He lost all sense of logic in his fear. He deviated from the plan. He was shortly seized by the shooters, who also killed his accomplice. They coerced their captive to open the truck's back door for them. Each and every piece of jewelry in the truck might have been taken. Only they choose to search for a particular thing. They immediately left after discovering the jewelry, which they believed to be. LAPD were on the scene quickly. The shooter was cornered in a homeless camp. They surrounded it with a cordon as they awaited the arrival of SWAT. Later, SWAT entered the camp. They learned that despite everything, their gunman had managed to flee. Despite being encircled by the LAPD, they pretended to be victims in order to escape. They also murdered a number of the destitute inside. Street was familiar with one of the victims. They both grew up in Long Beach, and Street had regrettably looked up to the deceased man as a young boy. Cooper Murphy looked to have it all back then. Street found it hard to believe he was unemployed, let alone that no one had come forward to claim his remains. Street went hunting for individuals in the hopes that they would miss the man because this death affected him more deeply than it usually does. While they searched for the shooters, he was doing this on the side. But he discovered that nobody would miss Cooper. Cooper wasn't a family man. His skating companions were meant to be his family. He even had a sizable deal, but everything disappeared after he injured his knee. After that, Cooper's contract was canceled. He accrued debt. Friends began lending him money, and when they learned he wouldn't pay them back, they gradually stopped returning his calls. They had not given his death any thought. They continued to demand payment. Later, Cooper would reside on the streets. Due to being in the wrong place at the wrong time, he was already barely making ends meet when he was killed. The shooters who carried it out afterwards stole a diamond ring. When SWAT investigated the relationship between the ring and the necklace, they learned that both objects were created by a particular jeweler in the city. To alert the jeweler of a potential threat, they proceeded to his workplace. Sadly, they arrived at his office too late because he had already passed away. In the vault, the man's apprentice was also hiding. She went by Juliet. She had been running away from the thugs who had tortured her boss, and she had known the jeweler long enough to be able to identify the stolen goods. Everything seemed to point in that direction as well. This soldier who stole the Quran was undetectable to SWAT. When they questioned Juliet directly about her knowledge of the Quran, she lied to them and said she had no idea. It turned out that Juliet had taken the Quran from a former lover. He served as a soldier in Syria. The Quran was stolen. Out of spite, she would steal it from him. She removed all the gems and sold them to her mentor, but instead of telling the police that she had done so, she withheld the information because she was still waiting to be paid. She desired to dispense with the Quran. When the shooters arrived, she left to sell it at a renowned bookstore. He was targeted for death. SWAT arrived to save the day, made their arrest, and recovered the Quran. They also detained Juliet because she did nothing but watch as her boss, her ex-boyfriend, and a number of other spectators were murdered without ever mentioning that she was reading the Quran. Tan discovered a person who would miss Cooper in the interim. He observed how much it was upsetting Street and began to inquire about Cooper's past. He discovered a former lover and a lawyer who agreed to arrange Cooper's burial. Following his mother's disappearance with their child, Hondo and Nichelle experienced a shock. She returned with his mother, but they couldn't forget how scared she made them. She was instructed to leave and not return. They only accepted her apology afterwards as payment for their forgiveness. And Hicks secured a date after acting on Deacon's suggestion to approach a charming widow. Thank you for watching.